What is up, everyone? Welcome to my weekly office hours. My name is JDM, aka Josh David Miller, aka the Shredder of Business Models, and I'm here every single Thursday on YouTube, on LinkedIn, and on Facebook, live streaming answers to your questions about the startup process with a particular focus on go-to-market and traction from idea all the way to product market fit. We got some really good questions today. Got a couple of good stuff to cover. We're going to talk about the actual process of finding traction, not just like what it is in theory, but like how do you actually engage in the process of finding traction. We're going to try to get a little bit specific there. We're going to talk about some of the things to keep in mind when finding traction, just in my ongoing quest to share with you my principles of startup traction. I'm going to talk about an upcoming event. I'm going to talk about, I'm going to answer a question from my buddy Dick about how to run a quick sprint. So we got a lot of stuff to cover here. It's going to be like a jam-packed little session today. So hello to everyone out there. If you're joining me live, definitely say hello down in the comments. Let me know what you're working on, and I'm super curious to know. But without further ado, let's actually just kind of dive in and let's start talking about some questions here. So the very first question that we got here is basically, how do you find traction? So I talked about like the definition of a startup and the definition of traction on the last couple of episodes, and basically, I just defined traction as like the acquisition of confirmatory data in support of a market hypothesis. And what I mean by that is that you have some theory of like, this is the thing that we're going to do, and this is what it's going to look like to to get there. And you have a tire on the road from here to there, and it's about momentum is premised on you being able to grip the road with your tire, and that's the thing that we call traction. And so in the marketplace, that grip is anytime we're getting positive data back from the marketplace, and ultimately that's sales, it's retention, it's referrals, it's that stuff. But earlier on, it could be something even just as simple as, are there people out there who have the problem I think they do? Finding evidence of that is really early stage traction. So that was kind of how I define it. And I don't have any fancy visuals today for this, but I do want to talk through the process of how do we actually go about finding traction. But we got some awesome people here. Mike, good morning. Nice to see you again. Nice to see my buddy Dick. We've got a question from him coming up in a little bit. And of course, June is often here. Good morning, June. So happy to see you guys back here today. So back to how do you find traction? So if that's what traction is, like, how do you go about the process of finding it? And the lame ass answer, I suppose, would be to say, well, you just gotta get customers to say stuff, and that's simultaneously true, but not at all helpful. So here's the more helpful version. I view it as like a 3-step process. And again, I apologize, I don't have any visuals for this, but like roughly a 3-step process. So the first one is you have to say, this is the thing that we're doing, right? So I mentioned that traction was about, here to there, and there's a road, and your startup, the tire has to grip to the road, right? So there's a destination that we think that we can get to. And so that's where we have to start with. This is what we're going to look like at our next step. And that could be pretty different. With the startups I work with, in my community work, they're often going from pre-seed to seed, right? So it's like, what do we need to look like in order to get a round of investment to do some early growth? The startups that I work with from a consulting basis are either trying to get from seed to Series A, or maybe from Series A to Series B. And so in those, that looks pretty different, but it's the same fundamental questions. Like, what do we need to look like? What do we need to look like internally in our company and in the marketplace in order to get a Series A? Like, what is that going to look like for us? For startups that aren't doing fundraising, it might be a growth target, but there's some there that we're trying to get to. So the first step is just defining what that is. It's wrong, right? But it's helpfully wrong. It's directional. It's over there. It's not over there, right? So we try to define what that is. And that's kind of 2 steps. So the first step is like, what is the business model hypothesis that we're trying to come up with for that? And so that's the stuff. I've talked about this before in office hours. Talk about it, so I'm blue in the face, but it's the who, what, how, and why of the business model. So that's step number 1, figuring out what that thing is. So then you have okay, so that's the thing that we're trying to do. And then you have to develop a model. And I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. You have to develop a model for what that looks like. And if you're going from like seed to Series A, or definitely Series A to Series B, then that is probably like pirate metric based. It's going to be, here are numbers, it's quantifiable. These are the things that we have to accomplish, right? And these are things that we have to look like. This is what our company needs to reflect in order to hit that next milestone. And so you develop what all of those little numbers look like. If you're really early on, that model is different. It's going to be much more qualitative. It's going to be, are there customers out there? Do they have the problem we think they do? Is it as urgent as we think it is? And so forth. So, but whatever it is, it's still like there's a thing there, a model that we're going to look at and say, this is what we're trying to hit. And so now we have the future state defined. We have to work backward to get to the present state. And the way that we do that is by saying, okay, well, we find the riskiest part of that hypothesis that we've laid out, of that model, that scorecard, or whatever we want to call it. And then we say, okay, that's our riskiest part. That's the first thing that we want to test. We want to test that one little piece. So now we have what's next, like literally this week, this month, and then we have where we're trying to go, which is much further out. And so then we have, okay, how do we connect the dots between those? And that is what we call innovation accounting. And so that's where you can't look at the end goal. So if your end goal is to have, certain revenue target, for example, but you're, still trying to figure out how you get customers into the funnel in the first place, revenue's the wrong measure. It's the ultimate right measure for where you're trying to go, because that's the metric that you're saying matters, but you can't really measure today. It doesn't do you any good. So instead you have to look at, okay, well, what are if that's true, if I'm going to see that revenue later, what is a signal that we're on the right track? And so for just in a hypothetical, like SaaS startup, that would be getting users to sign up getting users to sign up from freemium to premium. And in order to do that, a signal that this users will do that is that they're actually engaging with the freemium version, and a signal that they're going to do that is that they actually sign up for the freemium version, and a signal that they're going to do that is that they've landed on our landing page and engaged in some way, and a signal that they're going to do that is that they're engaging with, I don't know, us on a Facebook ad or an Instagram ad or something like that, or maybe just in content that we're putting out, or at a conference that we're having a booth at, or whatever it is, that they're engaging with the value prop early on. And a signal that they're engaging with the value prop is that they will engage with the value prop is that they have the problem that we think we do. And so you can see that we form that chain of leading indicators all the way from maybe nothing, like maybe really early on to nothing, all the way to this ultimate thing that we're trying to get to, like that's validated as revenue target or whatever. That chain of leading indicators, they're all wrong, right? We can't be right about it. Like that's, there's no bullseyes in life. Like we're not going to hit that, but they're directionally right. And so then we can start looking at, is this the thing? Like we go run an experiment on that first metric. Are we seeing that signal? Oh, great, we're seeing that signal. Now we move on to the next signal, right? And we're not seeing that signal. That's interesting. And then we pivot or persevere, go through the process. And again, each time that we're getting that data back and seeing that those signals are right is traction. And so that's what you do. So again, 30,000 foot view. If you guys are interested in this, let me know. I'll create a YouTube video on this, but 30,000 foot view. It's where are we going? What's the model look like? This is the thing that we're trying to do. What's the thing that we're going to start with? That's our riskiest assumptions, thing we're going to validate now. What are the chain of leading indicators, the innovation accounting to get us from the current state to the future state? And then you just go engage with that process. So that's how you actually go, finding, the process of finding traction is in that. So hopefully that answers the question, at least, superficially. Again, let me know if you guys want to know more about that. Okay. While we're on the subject of traction, I want to continue with my, 7-part series on my 7 principles for finding startup traction. So let's get to it. So we're going to talk about number 4, always be testing, but I really want to do a quick recap of the ones that came before. So let's just kind of hop in here and kind of take a look. So first one that we talked about 4 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, whatever that was maintaining a model. So this is actually what we just talked about. Like you have to, in order to know if you're on the right track, you have to know where the track is heading. So this is what our business we think looks like. It's our hypothesis. You got to know where you're going. Once you have that in place, principle number 2 is you always have to understand what you know, what you think you know, and what you know you don't know. And once you have that, that's going to introduce like a fairly accurate assessment of risk. It's going to tell you where you need to focus. It's going to do all of that stuff. So you have to understand what you know and what you don't know. Always be knowing, this is what I know. This is what I think I know. This is what I don't know at all. Okay, so that was number 3. And then last week we talked about, one of my favorites, maybe not my favorite, but one of my favorites of these principles, which is you have to focus on what's going to have an impact right now, not what's going to have an impact in the future. And my example of this is always when you have a a startup, let's say a SaaS app or something like that, and they're putting all this time and energy and money into like getting higher engagement rates before they figured out how to get users into the platform in the first place. So you're trying to boost engagement of no users or limited users as opposed to trying to just get freaking users in the first place. So you want to pull the lever that's going to have the most immediate impact. And that leads us to the fourth principle, today's focus, which is to always be testing. And so this is the one that I want to spend a moment talking about because it's the one that I think kind of throws some people, but it's pretty simple. It's that at any point in time, at any stage of startup, while you're still a startup, you have to be saying, this is the question that's most important to answer, and this is how I'm going about the process of answering it. And that might be, again, early stage. It could be, are there customers out there that have this problem? That's our most important question. And so we're going to be testing to figure out how we do that. It might be customer interviews. It might be explainer videos. It might be a social post. It could be ethnography. There's a number of things that you could do to try to figure that out. But you're saying, this is the question I need to answer, and I'm going to run experiments to do it. And so then you're always testing something else. But if you're much further on, it could be like, are we getting our freemium to premium conversion rates the way that we think that they need to run? So we're going to go about testing that. And will we get an increase if we actually change the pricing or package, or we move this over here, or maybe we have better empty states for things that are, that you only get access to in the premium. So, you get kind of this like hint like, hey, great feature right behind this paywall, and get things like that. And so, but you're always testing like what's going to work, what's going to work, what's going to work. So super important to always be saying like, what is the next question for your business, for your startup? What's the next question you got to answer? And then how are you going to be answering? You always want to know, always off the top of your head, this is the most important thing for me to know right now. And this is what I'm doing today, this week, this month to actually get an answer to that question. So if you want to find traction, always be testing something. It's the only way that you will literally survive. So there's that. June, thank you so much. You are too kind, too kind. But thank you so much for saying so. I appreciate your support. Okay, so I told you last week about an upcoming event called the Startup Challenge, and there are 2 cohorts. And last week I told you about the Catalyst cohort. So this event, and this time I'm going to tell you about the Traction cohort. So this event is September 23rd to 25th. So if you're going to be in Sacramento or want an excuse to be in Sacramento, September 23rd to 25th, I cannot recommend this event enough. I organized this event with my buddies Laura from Startup Sac. I'm actually wearing their t-shirt today, and from Cameron Loff, who runs the Carlson Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Sac State. And the basic idea is that it's a weekend of doing, where you learn how to do the important parts of a startup, that is launching and finding traction, by actually doing it. It's a weekend of doing. So the Catalyst cohort that I mentioned last week, brand new ideas, 60 seconds to pitch them Friday night, form teams around the popular ideas, have till Sunday night to turn them into a real business, pitch in front of a panel of judges for prizes, including cash. The Traction cohort, though, isn't for brand new ideas. Here's how it works. So you have something that you're already working on. You have a startup. I imagine most of you watching have some startup or project that you're working on. You have some work product behind you. Maybe you have a team. Maybe you have a product. Maybe you have revenue, but you don't have equity investment yet. That's kind of our rule. So then the teams show up on Friday night. You're going to pitch instead to a very small group, a select group of startup experts, of advisors and mentors, and they're going to quite lovingly shred your business model. They're going to tear it to pieces and find out like, okay, in your traction hypothesis, this is the part that needs the most work. And then you're going to have from that Friday night to Sunday night to make one big, just massive click forward in finding traction. And then you'll pitch that progress to a panel of judges on Sunday night for amazing prizes, some in-kind prizes, cash. It's going to be pretty awesome. We've got all kinds of good stuff for you throughout the weekend. We've got, of course, food and snacks and coffee and all that, but we have startup advisors and serial entrepreneurs and mentors to kind of help make sure you're on the right track. We've got some optional workshops if you want to level up some key skills to help you out through finding traction throughout the weekend. We've got coaches, like subject matter experts that you can schedule time to talk to. We've got pitch coaching. We've got all kinds of good stuff there. So I think the link's in the description if not, I'll add it, but it's jdm.bio/SC for Startup Challenge, jdm.bio/SC, and that'll redirect you to the page where you can get more information. There's some videos that you can look at, and then you can register. Early bird closes soon, so I would get that done But so there is my shameless plug before I move on to more questions. So actually, June says, and now I know what to focus on today. What is the most important question to answer? Yes, that's what you wanna first, in order to know what you need to focus on finding the question and then answering the question, right? So yes, I again know this is the most important thing for me to answer. This is what our business depends on right now. This is where we have the most risk right now. So that's really what we want to focus on. So I definitely recommend going through that exercise, and let me know, hit me up, June. Let me know what you actually come up with, what you think is the most important for you. Okay, so next question comes from my buddy Dick Gorley, who's startup mentor extraordinaire here in Sacramento. He's one of my fellow organizers for our 1 Million Cups chapter here. All around awesome dude, and he submitted a little video question here, which I'm gonna stick in my headphones so that I can play this video for you all. Dick, the floor is yours virtually.
Hey Josh, it's Dick Gorley. Good morning. Hope you're doing well. Appreciate all you're doing for startups. I'm going to attend today, and I just wanted to ask you a question that we may want to talk about during the session. I'm working on a project. It's a hardware project, and we would like to do a sprint to complete the MVP. It's been a little bit slow in terms of getting it nailed down, and we really like to get it out right away. So I wanted to see what advice you would give us on the best way to do a sprint and anything that we should be thinking about in terms of the quickest way to do it and the most effective way to do it. So that's it. Appreciate all you're doing, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.
All right. Awesome. So great question. I love talking about sprints. I will pick the mantle and run with it. There's two different uses of the word sprint. So one is it's just a strict development sprint. It comes from agile engineering, where you're just trying to get shit done, in a defined period of time. So it's highly iterative and thus agile. But that's not the meaning that I use most often. The meaning I use most often comes from the idea of design sprints, which come from Google Ventures. And the idea here is that you have this 5-day process for putting some type of prototype in front of real customers and actually testing it. And that while that's not necessarily what I would recommend in this particular case, I do actually just want to take a moment and run through that super quick, and then I will answer the question kind of more directly. So let's do that. I did rip some slides from a keynote that I did a couple of months ago. So yeah, that'll kind of help out with those there. So let's start with the Google Ventures process. So this is the Google Ventures original 5-day design sprint process. So if you get the sprint book, which is by Jay-Z and Jake Knapp, and it's a great book to walk through this 5-step process that they developed while at Google Ventures. And so basically it looks like this. So you start on Monday, you start mapping out the terrain. This is the problem space, that we're working in. You try to figure out, okay, what is the problem that we want to focus on? So you think you kind of know going in, but then you kind of blow it up a little bit. I'll come back to that in a second. Kind of blow it up a little bit, create some choices, from places that you can focus on. Then you narrow in on, this is the thing that I want to focus on. This is the problem I want to solve. And then Tuesday comes around and we enter the sketch phase, where you figure out, okay, so we want to come up with a bunch of potential choices for how we can solve this problem, or how we can at least think about solving this problem. And so we then create a bunch of choices. We sketching, right, out a bunch of potential solutions to that problem. And then on Wednesday we decide. So we get back through and now we decide on the right solution to focus on for right now. And then you spend Thursday creating a prototype of that, of whatever that solution is. And then on Friday, you put that solution in front of 5 real customers to get their real-time feedback on what that looks like. So that's the 5-day process. But at the Right Box, there's my consulting company where we do design sprints for startups, usually those who are venture backed. we have a set of like really modified versions of this same process that we use for different outcomes. And so I actually want to extrapolate out of this to say, like, this is the principles that we're talking about here, and then I'll try to say how we can apply them maybe in your case, Dick. So all right, so first, like, I think of design sprints as a pattern for identifying and making smart bets, meaning that they're the right size, that uses a bunch of different things. It's like the best of greatest hits from design thinking, from innovation psychology, from business strategy, and from a lot of other fields too. So it's a pattern. So let's talk about the pattern. So the pattern is a few different things. So the first pattern is that they focus on a wicked challenge. And so I'm not going to dive into that too much here, but a wicked challenge is one where the problem itself is unclear. So when we talk about like homelessness is a wicked problem because what we mean by homeless isn't that people do not have homes. It's not just that they are unhoused. That's not what most people mean. Otherwise, the solution would just be, let's just spend a block of cash and put everybody in a house. Homelessness solved, right? We all think that wouldn't solve the problem, but we don't really know what it is when we talk about homelessness that we're actually trying to solve. This is a wicked problem. Anything you're working on in business that's innovative or anything that's in a creative field is by definition a wicked challenge because the problem itself is not super well defined. So that's what we're doing. You want to focus on one wicked challenge, and so in this case, it's probably a how do you get this particular product to market in a timely period. So that's the first one. So next is that we use this concept that we call divergent and convergent thinking, or creating choices and making choices, that we use to surface potential options and then to identify what the winner is from those particular options. So I mentioned this a few times when I was going through the process, is that we blow up what we think the initial problem is to create choices for what is the right problem to focus on, and then we narrow in on this is the right problem to focus on, and then we create choices for what are all the potential solutions, and then we narrow in on this is the one right solution that we want to prototype. And so you can think about it like this. So let me get rid of myself for a second here. So we have divergent or convergent, or creating choices and making choices. And so you have this process where we start out kind of narrow. We do quantity over quality to get a ton of different choices. And then we go to this groan zone, which I won't really address here, but that's the idea of like, these choices, like how do we go about making one? It's the groan zone. And then you narrow in on here's the right one choice that we can focus on. So that's the idea of creating choices and making choices. So anytime you're going through the process of really anything in the design thinking space, but definitely when you're doing design sprints, you want to think in these cycles of how do I create choices and make choices, and because there's a lot of tools that you can use to kind of uncover that. So that's that. And then we have, this is the third of 5. So the third principle is that you're always going to do the same type of process. You develop an hypothesis, and then that hypothesis that we're developing, that we're testing, doesn't solve the problem. Right? Because again, we didn't really know what the problem was, but what it does is serve to clarify the question that we're asking. So this is like when we're talking about an early stage startup, it's like, do customers have this problem? Are we on the right track? We don't really know. We think we have like an hypothesis, but we don't really know what the end solution is. And we're not testing the end solution now. We're testing like, are we on the right track for this? And so all we're doing by getting data back is serving to help clarify that wicked challenge of, is there a market opportunity for this thing that we're trying to pursue? So you're always looking at it from a wicked challenge perspective. So you want to think about I'm getting data back in order to clarify the question that I'm asking, so that next week I can ask a better question. So that ties back to some of the traction thinking principles that I spoke about a moment ago. Number 4 is that you want to put you always want to get data back from the market. That's what traction is. We're always trying to get real data back. And the way to get real data back is to run an experiment with real customers that's going to either validate or invalidate a potential hypothesis. So always testing in front of real customers. And then lastly is, though, actually, before I get to that, so I want to just quickly say about what I mean by prototypes, because this is kind of unclear. And that's very, very pink. This probably looks a little weird, but on a slide behind me, it looked better. But anyway, so when we talk about prototype, these prototypes we're talking about, we're not talking about MVPs. And that's an important distinction. It's not a minimum viable product necessarily. A minimum viable product can be an eventual prototype, but we're talking about something that's as small as possible, but not any smaller, that's really disposable. We don't want to become attached to it because we might have to throw it away. So we want to create something that's disposable. But at the same time, in order to get data back, it has to be realistic. So that's what we call that like Goldilocks quality. It's not too underbaked. It's not too overbaked. It's right at the zone where it's believable enough that we can get real data back, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And then again, to surface back to what I was saying a second ago, is that it's always about that hypothesis. So the prototype has to be tied to an hypothesis that we're trying to test. So that's kind of what prototypes are. I'll talk about prototypes in an unrelated way in just a minute. But then lastly, we have this idea of constraints. And this is the most important part, I think, for any time we're talking about the idea of making rapid progress on a wicked problem, is that we have constraints. And so like we all think that like, oh, you gotta think outside the box, and it's like, open, this like green field, yay, open space for creativity. And we think that that's what creativity needs. And that's bullshit. That doesn't work. Like the problem with saying like that you need to think outside the box is that it tells you what not to do. Right? You don't think the way you've been thinking before, but we already knew that. So it doesn't help you because it's not saying, and therefore do this. So it doesn't really help you be creative. The way that you get creativity is by introducing constraints. And when we're talking about design sprints, you have constraints against your activatable resources. And this is true for any startup. At any stage, you have a certain set of activatable resources. You have a certain set of people, you have a certain set of capital, you have a certain set of internal capabilities, like technology, whatever it is that you have. And then the last one is time. Time is a really important constraint. So like when we're talking about a design sprint, we have a week. And it's not just an arbitrary week. That week was broken down into 5 days. And each of those 5 days are further broken down into specific time blocks. And we use that time constraint really wisely. It's like, how good are these sketches going to be? They're going to be 7 minutes good. Like that's what we're doing here, is by using that constraint to say, this is what the target is. And it ensures forward progress because we're saying we want something to be 7 minutes good. Give me something 7 minutes good. Whatever you have at the end of 7 minutes is what I got. Right. And that's the power of that constraint. So when you're trying to like, when you're introducing this process of like, how do we engage in a sprint to address, to get like this product out quickly, time is your friend. So you want to put a time constraint on it, and then put all of the other requisite constraints against your capabilities, resources, your people, process, technology, whatever it is that you have, money, right? You want to do all of that, all those constraints, layer them on, add the time constraint, and then work backward from the time constraint, and know that your process is going to be that resources plus that time good. It's not gonna be better than that, right? It's gonna be this many dollars and 5 weeks good. And that's our target, because the goal is to put something in front of customers and get data back. So that's broadly speaking, that's sort of how you approach that. Much more tactically, what I would do is say, like, first, and I don't know where you are on this process, I'm happy to talk to you offline about it, but the first step is like the hypothesis. What are we trying to learn? We're trying to figure out like this thing. And if you don't know exactly what you're hoping to get out of the launch, out of putting this prototype or this unit in front of customers, if you don't know exactly what you're going for, then I would start further back and say, like, what is it that we're like, what do we in like know and not know? Go back to like separating fact from conjecture, or maybe even go back to the model stage and say, here's the thing, this is the business that we think this product fits into, and this is the business model we're building around it. And these are the important metrics, and therefore, the most important question to answer is this. And so we're going to put this prototype in front of customers in order to learn that one thing. And so if you get to that point, right, and again, that was at each step on creating choices and making choices. When you get to that particular point, then okay, that tells me what this prototype must do and what we don't care if it does yet. Or if it does anything at all. Maybe does is actually too strong, or what it appears to do, depending on your status. But that tells you, like, we're going to narrow in on maybe this magic moment that we need to get real data back on. And so we're going to focus on just that little piece of the puzzle, that little small piece. To use SaaS as an example, it would be like, what is the point in there where, what's like the one feature, the one screen or 2 screens or 3 screens or whatever that's like in there in one little flow that lets them go, oh my gosh, that I can't do right now. That's amazing, right? And then we don't care about everything else. We're going to prototype that thing and see if we actually get that reaction, right? And so that's just an example to give you an idea of what I mean by like that magic moment. You want to find that little part. So if you're doing a physical good, you're looking again for that same thing. It's like, what is the point of doing that? Like a dumb example would be a pogo stick, right? It's like you jump on the pogo stick and you bounce up and down. Like the magic moment isn't opening the box, right? It's not, like seeing the unit for the first time because it just looked kind of funky, right? The magic moment is when you get that second bounce, and I don't know, I haven't been on a pogo stick in 30 years, but but whatever it is, like you're trying to get that little second bounce, that gives you the endorphin rush, from doing it. That's the magic moment. So if you're looking to prototype, it's that little piece that you have to do, and the rest of it doesn't matter all that much yet, if at all. So then you want to focus on prototyping that little piece. And then you use those constraints to backfill the creation of that particular prototype, all the while actually developing the list of customers that you want to talk to. And you pre-schedule those out, and then you conduct those interviews with real people to get the data back. That's how you do that. There is absolutely no circumstance where this cannot be done in a week. We do it in 4 or 5 days at most, all the time. And we being the broader industry, in addition to just the right box. So we can do it. If you're at the stage where you have to have this minimum prototype, in order to do it, then you can put the clock on that. But I would go back and say, this is the important question. This is how we can narrow in. This is the thing. This is how long it's going to take to get to precisely that thing. Because our constraint is like this set of features. And then probably, one constraint is how quickly they can make it at the factory or something, right? So then we introduce that constraint and say, this is for the outcome. And so then you work to that date, or the date after, whatever, to actually going and running these customer interviews and putting in front of them, getting data back. So hope that's helpful. I kind of went on for, I don't know, like 10 minutes there about running design sprints, but let me know if I'm crazy off track with what you're trying to do there, Dick. And again, we can certainly talk offline about that. Speaking of prototypes, I got a little something coming soon. Still kind of hush, but I got something coming soon on prototypes. It's a free thing. It's going to be like, I'm really excited about it. Hopefully be coming next month. But it's if you hit up jdm.bio/prototypes, you put in an email address and get on the list. And here's the amazing thing. So let me tell you about prototypes. The amazing thing about a prototype is that they can increase your chances of success, or at least decrease your chances of failure, which amounts to the same thing. Here's some real data. This is real. If you are starting a startup, you have a 95% chance of failing. 95% chance. That's 19 out of 20 times you will fail. But this is what's really interesting. If you run a prototype, by which I mean creating that lightweight surface that I talked about, Goldilocks zone thing, throwing it in front of, a real customer to get feedback. If you do that, right? If you go through that cycle just 10 times, that's it, just 10 times. Then you can drop that failure rate, that 95% failure rate, by half. By half. And this is what's even more amazing. If you don't do 10 prototypes, if you do 50 prototypes, 50, you do 50 prototypes, that failure rate drops to under 20%. Prototypes are the magic weapon of finding really valuable, really compelling startup value props. And you could do them super, super, super fast. Most prototypes take an hour to 4 hours. Like we're not talking about anything complicated. A lot of prototypes you can do in 10 minutes. So we're talking about doing something that's super fast, super lightweight, that has this amazingly broad, outsized impact on your productivity. And I got an exciting resource coming soon about that. So if you want to level up your prototyping skills, definitely sign up to get notified. We'll have an announcement on that probably coming sometime in the next week or so for a hopeful delivery in October sometime. But I won't say any more about that today. So great. So thank you for that. And thank you for your question, Dick. Glad that was helpful. Again, hit me up if you want to talk about any of that there. That's kind of all I got today. So we're here every single week. So I'm going to be back on Thursday next week at 10 a.m. Same place, same time to do this all over again. If you have a question for me and you want to submit a question like Dick did, then you can hit up this link, which is also in the description. And you can ask a question. You can do a video, you can do audio, you can just type something in if you want and get your question answered on the air. That's how that works. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Oh wait, a little question here from June. What you created a website before you've created prototypes. Well, that's fine. It doesn't change the away the need for a prototype. So prototypes are something that established startups that have like Series A funding do. It's not just something that you do when you don't have a product yet. It just changes the nature of what you're actually prototyping a bit. So and it's always based on like the question that you're trying to ask and like, what you're trying to prove from the market. But it's the same thing, still super valuable. So still be good for you. So good news for that. Okay, great. That's it. That's all I have. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your week and a great weekend. And I will see you next week